This is Rob Powell, and today in Turbo Talks we're talking to Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio about her Zwift adventures. Alright everyone, welcome back to the Turbo Talks podcast. My name is Rob Powell and I'm joined today by the woman who started this season winning 2 national titles on the road. But then the pandemic transformed her into a Zwift addict, I think we can say. But she just continues her winning ways online these days. But before we're going to hear all about her Zwift journey, I'm going to ask you guys just to check and double check whether you are already subscribed to the Turbo Talks podcast on your favorite platform. It just makes it easier. You can listen back to previous episodes, plus new episodes like this will automatically pop up in your library. So it's all too easy. Just make sure you do that. And of course, you're probably going to want to share this episode with a friend who also, probably can use some Zwift lessons from this champion. So time to jump into it with today's guest. You may have guessed it already. She's the South African champion of CCC-Liv, Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio. Welcome on the show, Ashleigh. How are you going?
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you. And you?
Yeah, I'm doing really well as well. I must say, I was preparing for this interview, and usually what I'll do, I'll check everyone on pro cycling stats. And these days, I was going to check Zwift Power, the website, something different.
Yeah, things have changed quite quickly. It's been an interesting journey.
And I must say, I thought, I'm going to have all the statistics up to date. And then I saw the last 2 hours, you already did it right again. So maybe you really became a bit of a Zwift addict.
Yeah, well, I've certainly learned to appreciate Zwift since the lockdown. So if I'm 100% honest, I was like every road cyclist pro. You know, I really, before lockdown happened, before the pandemic happened, I really didn't enjoy indoor training. And I avoided it at all costs. So, you know, I live in Girona. We have beautiful, we arguably it's a cycling paradise in Europe. So we have access to amazing, beautiful country roads and very good weather. So usually I haven't had to train indoors at all. And then with the breakout of the pandemic, the lockdown reality became, reality very quickly. So in Spain, for very much the beginning part of the season, I suppose I was in the mindset that a lot of people were in that, it's something happening somewhere else in the world and it's not my problem. And then it started to come closer and closer to home and the races started to become affected. So it started to affect me more personally. And then all of a sudden, Spain went from, a rumor of lockdown on Friday to full lockdown on Sunday. So it was literally in a period of 48 hours that the lockdown was implemented. And I was faced with the reality that all of a sudden I wasn't able to train on the beautiful roads of Girona anymore. And luckily, I did have a really good indoor setup. So I had my Tacx Neo smart trainer and I had a big screen TV and the whole Zwift setup because we'd been exposed to Zwift before about 2 years back because Zwift came to stay at our business in Girona called Rocacorba Cycling. They used it as a training camp facility for some of their Zwifters who had won a competition. So I'd been introduced to this platform before and it looked intriguing, but it was still that kind of like, if I don't have to do it, why am I going to do it? But anyways, now suddenly I was faced with the reality that I was stuck indoors. And so, very early on, I decided that, I could make my life really difficult and dwell on what I can't do. Or I could try my best to embrace the new reality that faced me because of the pandemic and to try to make the most out of it. And at first, my motivation started mostly around, let me try and highlight some weaknesses and let's start working on the weaknesses. So if I think of myself as an athlete, I'm very much identified as a climber. So I'm a lot out the saddle, I like to use the bike in my riding, but one of my weaknesses is that maybe I'm not the most powerful rider, for example, in the saddle. So I thought, now this is the opportunity to face, my weaknesses. It's not something I really enjoy doing, but I'm going to get on the indoor trainer. And at first I just started doing intervals on the indoor trainer and the intervals were hard. I mean, the reality is that indoor training is much harder than outdoor training. So the first week was really a big mental challenge to just embrace the fact that it is harder. I have to drop my threshold power to be more realistic in the beginning, and let's just try and work through this. And at first, I didn't really even use Zwift when I was doing my intervals. I thought, this is a distraction. Why would I want to use Zwift? I'm focused, I'm doing my intervals. But I then got invites from some of the Italian pros to join a meetup on Zwift. And so I joined the meetup. And that was my first introduction to Zwift, where I realized, wow, okay, this has some potential. There's the opportunity to ride in this virtual world with people from all around the world. And there's a nice social element to it. And so that was the first attraction. And then I started trying to do my intervals in Zwift. And at first I was also quite frustrated, and I found it was difficult to execute the intervals as I would usually do them in the road, because usually I, for example, like to use the climb of Rocacorba to do my intervals. I like, to do repeats up and down the climb. So at first I couldn't really find a way of simulating this in the virtual world. And then it didn't take me long until I came across Alpe du Zwift. And suddenly Alpe du Zwift provided me a platform in the virtual world very similar to the platform I would usually use in the real world to do my intervals. And so, from week to week, I started to discover the potential of Zwift more and more. And yeah, in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks, I was totally hooked. So yeah, that's a little bit of background, how I managed to find my way to enjoy Zwift.
Yeah, already so much good stuff in there, and maybe so many familiar things for people who during this time also jumped on Zwift and gave it a go. Maybe also a bit hesitant in the beginning, see what's going to happen, and then discover the beauty of it. Like you said, you suddenly came into the situation of a lockdown. Was it then, and you decided to work on your weaknesses? Was it then something that you discussed with your trainer to see, okay, how am I going to attack this?
Yeah, of course. So the very first thing to do was to sit down and have a long chat with my trainer to decide how we're going to approach the situation. If I'm totally honest, I actually, I've changed coach this season. So I started with a new coach at the end in November last year, and my focus, or my training focus, changed a little bit or evolved a little bit. So I had gone through a period where in the off season I'd done a lot more hours or more quantity than what I would usually have done in the past. So now it was quite a big adaptation. I just made the shift to the new mentality of training, a bit more volume together with intervals. And now suddenly we had this reality that it was lockdown, and indoor training. And so, I had a long conversation with my coach, and we acknowledged, that indoor training is very different to road cycling, and that it might be quite difficult to execute the same amount of volume on the indoor trainer, because it is, as I said, much harder on the muscles. You don't have the same sort of like freewheel ability, or, sitting. Actually, well, funny enough, in Zwift, you do have the option to sit in the wheels. So that is something that I started to realize as I used the platform more. So in the beginning, we really took it week by week, adapting week by week to the new challenges that indoor training presented. And as I said to you, in the first week, it was really quite hard because my muscles, it was a new kind of fatigue, suddenly the intervals felt that much harder. It was much harder to hold the power at the numbers I would usually hold on the road. And I really had to dig deep inside myself to find the mental strength, to overcome this challenge, to kind of accept the limitations, but to continue to push, to try to get closer and closer to the numbers that I'm used to holding. And so the first week, my legs were really sore, and I didn't have access to a physio either, so it was a whole new challenge. And then the second week, it was really, again, pushed mentally to get through the fatigue of the muscles. And then week 3, we actually decided to kind of back off a little bit and just have an easier week to recover. And then week 4, I really started to see the switch, when suddenly my body was adapting to the new form of training. We could suddenly start taking the hours up a bit more to get closer to the volume that I would usually want to be holding. So from week 4 in lockdown, I was doing pretty much 20 hours a week on Zwift, including all the interval sessions I would usually be doing on the road. And my numbers were just getting better and better week by week. I was starting to get closer and closer to my road numbers. So it was really good to start at first with the guidance of my coach to say, okay, let's be realistic. Let's take it step by step. Let's drop the threshold by 30 watts to start with. Let's drop your volume by 30%, 20 to 30%, and let's take it week by week and let's see how we progress. And in the beginning, I suppose, lockdown was always presented to us by the government as a 2-week period. So it started off as lockdown for 2 weeks, and then it got extended by another 2 weeks, and then by another 2 weeks. So I suppose that's how I managed to cope with it. You kind of just put it as 2-week blocks each time, and at the end of the 2 weeks, you see where you are, and you readjust again. So it was quite an amazing journey. And something I'm actually quite grateful for, because I've learned so much through the process, both physically and mentally.
And as you said, I think somewhere else already, like you feel like you're a master of Zwift now. And if I'm right, before the Tour for All started, the Zwift Tour for All, there's been like on the team, the CCC-Liv, everyone sort of like prepared a topic or a subject to talk about and to educate each other about. And you gave sort of like a tutorial on Zwift to your teammates. Is that right?
Yeah, so when the when the races started to get cancelled and the lockdown started, I mean, the team did a really good job of adjusting quickly, to think, how are we going to get through this as a team. So from the very beginning, we started we call it our CCC-Liv Academy. So we do 2 meetings a week on Zoom, so that we can talk to each other in video. And we had topics every week to discuss, and it ranged anything from team tactics to mental strength to how everyone's getting through this challenging time. And then, of course, it also came to Zwift because it started to become a reality that there was going to be some competition on Zwift. And it also became a reality that Zwift is a really good platform for us to engage as teammates, now with all the restrictions, but also to engage with our fan base. So that's something that was very, very interesting to me when it came to Zwift, is that it suddenly opened up the world to a whole new reach, because usually, in the world as we know it before the pandemic, if you were going to do a sponsor event or a ride as a CCC-Liv team, to be able to ride with your fans, you have to be in the same place at the same time. But now, all of a sudden, in the virtual world, you can be riding with people all around the world, all on this virtual platform. So it just suddenly opened up the world. In the lockdown, I think that's what really helped me during this lockdown period, where it was so-called isolation and social distancing. But all of a sudden, my cycling became more social than it had ever been, So to be able to I started off, for example, hosting a live ride on Zwift every Monday, and I'm still doing it. And it's a women's ride, and it's so amazing how every Monday you get together and you're riding with people that are in California, in the UK, in Holland, in Germany, in France. You're all coming, even South Africa, a lot of my South African fans, we're all riding together in this virtual world, but actually we're so far apart. And then, it's just a whole new dimensions that opened up to me. I've just started to see how nice it was to engage with women, because all of a sudden, the female fan base became more accessible, because it's a reality in pro cycling that we struggle sometimes to engage our female fan base because they feel intimidated, or they feel shy, or that they might become embarrassed if they come and join us for a ride because they can't keep up. And it's really amazing how Zwift has broken down those barriers between the female fan base, because all of a sudden you come together on this virtual platform. The women seem to be more confident because they're doing it from the safety of their home. So other than just the danger of traffic or maybe a puncture, and they feel they can't fix their puncture, it's also just that safe kind of environment where suddenly they feel more more confident to ask a question because they feel comfortable in their own home. So it's amazing how Zwift has opened up that potential in terms of developing your or growing your female fan base, but even bigger, growing your entire fan base, because suddenly you ride past someone in Zwift, in Watopia, in the virtual world of Watopia, and it might be someone who's riding in, as I said, in California, and they knew nothing about CCC-Liv, and suddenly you ride past them in your CCC-Liv kit, and you have this little orange jersey next to your name, which says you're a pro, and they see your name, and you maybe press your ride on button as you ride past, and you give them a ride on, which is a thumbs up, saying, hey, ride on. And suddenly they're like, oh, who's this? Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio. She's a pro. She gave me a ride on. Oh, I'm going to follow her, So it's incredible how it opens up the world to fan engagement. It's a whole new dimension now.
Definitely. Sorry, you could definitely see that already. And do you notice for yourself what it has done to like both the team brand and also maybe for your personal brand? Did you gain followers somewhere on social, etc.?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. So, I mean, I drifted a little bit off course, but so it's crazy how it starts just connecting the team, for us to ride together somewhere in the virtual world, but then you start accessing a whole new network of people. So for sure, I've seen an increase in my following. I have a very good following on Zwift, for example. So a lot of people are following me on Zwift, but I've also seen how, I'm gaining new followers on Instagram, on Twitter, on all my social platforms because of, this visibility or the people that I'm coming across through riding on Zwift. And then interestingly enough, the opportunity that Zwift presented with the Tour for All, the racing on Zwift with live coverage on Eurosport and on GCN. I mean, it was an incredible opportunity for women's cycling because suddenly we had equality with the men. Suddenly we were racing the same races, the same distances, the same course, and we were getting similar TV hours to the men because they were, they'd start one day the women first, and the men second, and then the next day the men first and the women second. So, we were suddenly on mainstream TV and streaming on GCN, and it's incredible. It's strange for me to say this, but after winning races in the virtual world, I actually got more interest and more engagement on my social media and more followers than what I've ever experienced with regards to racing in the real world. Oh, and wow. The interesting thing that come out of all of this as well is that Zwift or virtual racing, so digital racing, whether it's on Zwift or on any other platform, it suddenly is engaging also a new fan base because suddenly the numbers are starting to show that the people watching the virtual racing are of a younger demographic, So for me, although I absolutely love racing on the road still, and I don't ever believe that the virtual world will replace the real life racing. It's just very interesting the opportunity that virtual racing suddenly presents cycling in terms of growing fan base and in reaching a new audience, and in particular for women's cycling. It's just shown such great opportunity for women's cycling to get the exposure that our sport needs.
And maybe we can just take a small step back. People who are listening now are thinking like, "Oh, she's so enthusiastic about Zwift. This must be it." But I'm still not really sure what it is. Can you sort of like explain to them, like really short, like what is Zwift and what are the opportunities that they've got there?
Yeah, so Zwift is one of the virtual platforms where you can train and now race online. There are different kinds of platforms, but I suppose the reason why I really enjoy Zwift is because it presents a great opportunity as a social platform. So to be able to ride with other people all around the world, to be able to chat. So they have a app that you download onto your phone or onto your iPhone, which is called the Companion app. And so while you're riding around, you have the option to chat, to type messages to the people around you. They also have quite a lot of different options in terms of creating group rides. So Zwift, every day, for example, they have a lot of events, and it goes literally every 10 or 15 minutes, there's a new event on Zwift. So it satisfies all the time zones across the world. And it can be just casual group rides to races. So, there's the opportunity to enter a race, no matter who you are, on Zwift. And then there's also the option to create your own meetups. So you can start inviting your own followers to join you for a meetup, which can be everyone holding their own power, and you all just try to stay together, or you try to hold the similar power to weight so that you're riding in a group. But you also have the option that you can create a banded ride. And what that means is that it doesn't matter what power anybody is holding, you always stay together as a group. So that's a really nice way of, for example, engaging with people of different abilities. It's more a social ride, where everyone stays together and you can chat. But then, of course, there's also the racing possibility on Zwift. And the reason why I think Zwift has become quite a nice virtual platform for virtual racing is because of the extent to which they have developed their algorithm. So in Zwift, there is a draft effect in Zwift. So if you sit on someone's wheel, you do get a draft effect, a little bit like you would in the real world. And they have a whole lot of algorithms, even when it comes to, for example, road surface. If you're riding on the gravel, then they have a rolling resistance algorithm in it. So depending on what bike you choose or what wheels you choose, you can go faster. So, for example, if you choose a mountain bike on a gravel route, you will go much faster than if you were riding a road bike. And then, interestingly enough, they've also introduced a more gamified effect where they have power-ups. So there's 5 different types of power-ups, and they range from the featherweight power-up, for example, where if you push it, so you have a little feather that appears on your companion app, and you click on the feather, and for 30 seconds it takes 9 kilograms off your weight. So all of a sudden you feel this boost, on the climb. And this could, for example, help you to break away, because if you use it at the right moment, you can get that 20 or 30 second advantage on your competitor, and maybe it helps you in the race, And then there's other ones for draft effect, where it boosts your draft effect, or where it makes you undraftable, so no one can sit in your slipstream. So it's a nice platform because it has all of these so many different options to satisfy so many different kinds of people, from whether you just want to have a nice social ride together and you don't want to have to worry about keeping up with someone, to racing and including these gamified effects to make the racing a little bit different. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Zwift and really understanding what it's all about. But I think
you could go for hours and hours, or not, on Zwift.
Exactly. It's almost like a new discipline. So that's the interesting thing. And I think that's what digital cycling is presenting to cycling in this time, is that there is almost a new discipline in virtual cycling, and that it really can complement road cycling because of, for example, we've spoken a lot about because of the advantage it gives in terms of networking and reaching your fans, or engaging a new fan base through the racing, so a younger fan base. But it also, I've even seen it through the lockdown period, how it has complemented my road cycling in terms of helping me to work on my weaknesses and to become a more powerful rider. So the reality is that during the period that I was training indoors on my Tacx Neo Smart Trainer on Zwift, I saw real life advantages in my power. So I did a power test, and I saw that I had increased my max power by 30 watts. And then when the lockdown finally ended in Spain and I was allowed to go outdoors, I went and I attempted, because I live literally at the base of a climb in Girona area called Rocacorba, which is quite a well-known climb for pros to go and test themselves and their form, so the Strava times on Rocacorba are quite competitive, and so I went up Rocacorba on the first day that I was allowed to ride outdoors, and I set a time of 31:09, which was 3.5 minutes faster than what my previous QOM time was. So it really
Oh,
showed
wow.
that training indoors, not only was it a great platform for engagement, but it also made me stronger on the road. So I think that there's proof now that virtual cycling and road cycling can actually really complement each other in more than one way.
So definitely something that you're looking forward to carrying on through the rest of the season, maybe even the rest of your career in combining those two.
Yeah, I definitely am. I really enjoy virtual training and virtual racing. I really find it exciting. It's a different kind of racing because usually it's short and it's quite intense. But yeah, for me, it's really exciting to it's a little bit like cyclocross, I suppose, the way there are road cyclists like my own teammate, Mariana Boss, who races on the road, but she also races cyclocross. It would be a bit similar, so where I would race on the road, but I also want to do virtual racing. Because it's fast, it's exciting, it's a little bit different, it engages a new fan base, and I can do it from the comfort of my home. So I can actually have my family all in the same room as me, cheering me on.
I was about to say, I saw those photos when you were at the Tour for Zwift and all the other races that you actually have your family standing next to you and they're just cheering you on while you're racing. That must be pretty cool.
Yeah, it is quite exciting. So it's a different, as I said, discipline, but I really find it really complements the road cycling. And I've also, other than racing online, I've kind of decided, well, I will continue with the Liv ladies ride that I do every Monday at 5. Because I think it's just a nice community building opportunity. It's a nice opportunity to engage a female fan base, to break down those barriers. I also committed to continuing to do at least one interval session a week on Zwift, because I think it is good to continue to keep that sort of high torque power style of riding into my training regime. And then, it's also a great opportunity, for example, for me to engage in meetup rides, to build my network, even in terms of our business, Rock-A-Corba Cycling, to ride with guests.
Yeah.
Usually would have come to stay with us at Rock-A-Corba Cycling. Now I can ride with them in the virtual world. And yeah, I even see a lot of opportunity for it in terms of possibly engaging with or creating an academy style initiative where I can play a more hands-on role in trying to help develop young talented riders in South Africa, because all of a sudden, although I'm living in Spain, I could, for example, do a certain number of training rides a month or maybe once a week with some of the young talented riders in South Africa and help them to develop their talent, through the virtual world. And it also presents a great opportunity, for example, for countries like South Africa, where one of the biggest obstacles against the development of female cycling is the danger, of riding on the road and the safety aspect of it. So virtual cycling, training on these amazing smart trainers, which are just getting better, week by week. I even am on an outdated Tacx Neo trainer now. I know there's a new version and they're just getting better and better. So it just keeps making your virtual experience that much more realistic. And so even if I just comment in terms of the smart trainer that I'm on, the Tacx Neo, it's not 100% rigid either. It's got the option that it moves a little bit like you would on the road. So the technology is just getting better and better, that it simulates the feeling of the road even better and better.
And if you then look at maybe at the racing that you did quite a bit of racing on there, not unsuccessful. If we talk about that Zwift Tour for all, you did 3 stages and you won all 3 of them. How was that with the team? Was it still a bit of a team effort? Because I heard you guys were like on Discord, like a separate app you can stay in communication with each other during the races. How did that work? What was said during the races to each other?
Yeah, so it was really a great opportunity to get as close as possible to the real life experience of racing together. So we first started off as a team just doing some social rides on Zwift. So the team meeting up and chatting on Discord and just trying to simulate that feeling of, okay, if we were on training camp and we were going on a big group ride, as a team, this is how we would be. We're riding along and we're chatting. So that was our first, introduction to Zwift and Discord, the app which we use for chatting. And then the race opportunity came up with the Tour for All. And so, yeah, every day with the race, we would meet, half an hour before on Discord while we were warming up, and we'd all talk together a little bit about the tactics and how we're going to approach the race, because there are tactics involved in Zwift racing. And then, the race would start, and it would be similar to the kind of conversation you'd be having on your race radio, so talking to each other, motivating one another, maybe saying, hey, watch this rider, she's looking strong, or, okay, the climb's coming, get to the front of the peloton, because it really is, it is like that in Zwift. You have to position yourself well before you get before you enter the climb. So it was really the closest we could get to simulating, the racing that we do on the road, but in the virtual world. So it was really a fun experience, to get that same kind of feeling of connection through the Discord app, chatting to one another like we would on the race radio, and then watching our avatars, racing around this virtual world.
And telling each other which power-ups you had.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're going to use it, etc. What's your favorite power-up in Zwift?
My favorite power-up is the feather one. So the featherweight
on the climbs.
On the climbs, it really has a good advantage. But another really good power-up on Zwift is the aero helmet, because when it comes down to a sprint, then the aero helmet is a huge advantage in the sprint. And the reality is, the good thing with Zwift in terms of virtual racing is that it doesn't always come down purely to power to weight, which is sometimes the scenario with other virtual world apps these days, is that, it's all about your power to weight. If you have the best power to weight, you win. But in Zwift, that's not necessarily the case. The only place where power to weight really, really has a big advantage is when the climb is steeper than 7 or 8%. I'd say that's pretty much the turning point. So if it's above 7 or 8%, then your power to weight really makes a big advantage. And for example, a featherweight power up will have a huge advantage. But any climbs that are less than 7 or 8%, there really still is quite a good draft effect involved. So it does make it still quite realistic. You don't just break away very easily. There's quite a lot of tactics involved in terms of when is the exact right moment to attack if you want to get away. And then what that means is that you do sometimes come to the finish as a small group, and then it's a sprint. And then the aero helmet is definitely the best power up to have.
Okay. I want to move on to the Turbo Talks fan question of the week, because it's a really on-topic one for this one. It's asked by Helen Bridgman, and she wanted to know, what are your top tips for winning Zwift races? What's the secret?
The secret is you have to be ready to suffer because they are hard, and you have to start fast. So it's just the reality of Zwift racing is everyone kind of gets really excited to start, and the reality is there is also a bit of a delay, So if you increase your power, you only really feel the effect of it maybe 5 seconds, a couple of seconds later in the game. So for example, when it comes to starting a race on Zwift, you actually already start to do an effort 5 seconds before the start, because then when you start, you're already moving. If you wait for the countdown timer to go and it's 0 and then you start, you're for sure going to be left behind. So the important thing is to already start your effort 5 seconds before the race starts, and then also to be ready to start fast, because everyone's a bit excited, everyone's jostling for positioning, so the avatars, you're all trying to find your positioning in the bunch. And so the start is usually fast. And then usually it kind of settles down after 15 or 20 minutes, and you can hopefully your heart rate comes down a little bit. But the reality is that you've got to be ready to stay at a high heart rate more or less for the whole race, unless it's a longer race. So we had the experience in Tour for All that we did race a stage that was 70 kilometers. And then it is a little bit different. But most Zwift races are between 40 minutes to 1 hour. And so it's 1 hour of full gas, ready to suffer. And just got to enjoy it for what it is. Somehow I think we're crazy because we enjoy the suffering.
And now I can imagine if you do like all that intense riding on your trainer, how do you combine that now with riding outdoors? Are your outdoor rides like more the easy, longer rides now than they were before, maybe? Or
Yeah, so I mean, it's very difficult to execute a long endurance ride on Zwift because it's just too hard, and it does become boring if you want to do a really long 4 or 5 hour ride. So for sure, outdoors is ticking the box for me in terms of the long endurance rides, but it is also still important to do some, for example, interval efforts outdoors as well. Because at the end of the day, that's my real profession is racing outdoors. So I can't lose the feeling for that, So as I said, I like to do now with the lockdown restrictions being lifted and I am allowed to train outdoors. I like to do some social rides on Zwift every week. And I like to do 1 interval session on Zwift, maybe sometimes 2, depending on what's on my schedule for the week. So if I have interval sessions that are quite sort of controlled, where it's maybe like on off type of stuff, so under over stuff where it's 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, then I quite like the opportunity that indoor training and Zwift presents, because you can really control those on-off efforts. You don't have the situation that, oh, now I'm at a traffic light, or oh, now I'm suddenly in the town and it's too dangerous to hold my power at the power that I want. So if it's a really controlled type of interval set like that, then it's really good to do it on Zwift. I also like to do the occasional talk session on Zwift. On Alp do Zwift, I always go to Alp do Zwift for my talk sessions, because it really means you have to really push talk, so you're building power. But you have to find a balance, because too much of that on Zwift also just fatigues the legs. So, it's nice to find a balance. But outdoors, definitely for the long rides, the endurance rides, and of course, at least some of the interval sessions a week, and then talk sessions or really controlled sessions I like to do on Zwift.
Okay. And maybe if the people who follow you on Zwift, they may have noticed that you're up to, I think, about 40 or 41,000 meters of climbing. Now the question looms, did you enter that Everest challenge that you get the Zwift concept bike when you get to 50,000 meters?
I didn't actually. And sometimes I think to myself, oh, it was silly, I should have. But then because I'm a CCC-Liv rider, why would I want to change my Liv Langma bike? I'm on a Liv Langma in the virtual world, so I don't need a Tron bike.
That's the correct answer. All right. Let me see. I think I have one more question for you. Yeah, I'm actually quite curious to know, like you said, like it improved your power output by training indoors, etc. What can we expect now when racing resumes outdoors and people and a bit more riders training indoors as well? Is everyone just going to make a jump in their level, or what do you expect from that?
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. So, I mean, part of my motivation during the lockdown period was that I thought to myself, okay, if I can find the motivation, because I know that a lot of road cyclists have a bit of a brain block to indoor training, or maybe without the racing, they're struggling to motivate themselves because there isn't a goal. So I thought to myself, okay, I know I'm a very self-disciplined person, and I know that I can take a lot of motivation from the bigger picture. So just becoming a better cyclist or improving my power output. I don't necessarily have to have a race to motivate me. So I thought, okay, well, maybe this is my opportunity to use this period as a little bit of an advantage. If I can stay really motivated and productive and train hard during this period, then I should have an advantage when the racing finally resumes. So yeah, I mean, I'm proud of the way that I managed to adapt and to find the motivation to continue to improve, and that I could actually measure that improvement in seeing, my power output increasing, my VO2 max increasing. So for sure, I hope to get onto the road and to have a whole new level. And it's encouraging for me because I'm not the youngest cyclist. So, I'm in my 30s, and to see that I still have potential to improve, that I haven't reached the ceiling of my potential yet, is very encouraging. And so it gives me a lot of motivation when we return to road cycling. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how the peloton adapts. The reality is, not all of us were restricted to indoor training. So there were a lot of cyclists in other parts of Europe. So, for example, my Dutch teammates who could continue to train outdoors. So a lot of them continue to execute their training as normal. And then there are some that were stuck indoors and they really struggled to find motivation. So it's going to be interesting. But I think we do all have enough preparation or enough time now, that we're all working towards the 1st of August, and we all know kind of more or less what our goals are and which races we want to target. So I don't think that one party has an advantage over the other right now, because there were some people that were starting to say, well, those who can ride outdoors, they have an advantage over those who are stuck indoors. I think we all have equal opportunity now to put the effort in, to get back to the racing in the best possible form. But I must say, I'm very interested to see, all this work that I've done indoors. I'm hoping that it translates into even better performance on the road.
And hopefully it can continue your unbeaten streak this season.
Yes, that would be wonderful, yeah.
All right, we're going to wrap it up. Ashleigh, I want to thank you so much for your time. Hope we didn't take up too much of it. Thanks for explaining everything from Zwift.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I always have a lot to say. So for those of you who want to listen, I think, make sure you have a cup of coffee and some time to listen.
Definitely. All right, a big thank you to Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio for joining us this week, and a big thank you for all of you listening to another episode of the Turbo Talks. So if you enjoyed this Zwift extravaganza with Ashleigh, don't forget to tell a friend about this podcast, and perhaps just go join her on her weekly Monday ride, or maybe on another Zwift event soon. But most of all, just make sure you never stop cycling. This was Rob Pauw with Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio. Stay tuned for the next Turbo Talks.